Tonight we might just start with a little exploration before we move into our practice. So just a short pebble drop-in exploration. We've touched on a little bit over the time the question of motivation. Why do we sit to do our meditation? What is our interest in the spiritual life, and what does it mean for us? We need to answer these questions for ourselves, and it's really not up to anybody else to tell us what the answer is. But as friends, we can certainly encourage each other to take these questions to heart and to put the time aside to genuinely reflect on these questions and indeed our responses. And this is something that needs to be done more than once. I actually think as a matter of practice to continue to ask this question again and again, not as a way of undermining ourselves in the practice, or undermining or kind of pulling the threads of our practice, but rather as we continue, particularly with our meditation practices and the explorations of the teachings, it is important that we pause and we reflect and we start to notice that actually our motivation can develop and mature. And what we thought was kind of the motivation for us turning up to practice a year ago may actually mean something a little different today. Does that resonate? Do you have a sense? So it's really a lively exploration rather than something that we do once and then feel comfortable with and then pop it on the shelf and just kind of sail blind with that. So I will invite you now just to take some quietness to ask yourself some variation of those questions. And it might start with the broader question of what does it mean for you to journey the spiritual life. And I've been presumptuous in that. For me, even sort of stating that our meditation practice is a part of a spiritual journey. That is also up to you to work out whether or not that resonates, and whether that feels comfortable for you or not. For me, it certainly does. But you may have a different response, and that's okay, but it's good for you to be clear about it. So to ask yourself that question, is your meditation practice part of a spiritual journey, or is it part of a daily survival sort of technique, a way of kind of getting through and balancing up and finding some peace in the circumstances of the day and the weeks and the months? And indeed, do these need to be completely different things? Like, is it possible that actually there is some relationship, some coming together of these points, and that they don't need to be a place of tension? But for this to have some meaningful depth to it, we need to examine this for ourselves. So I think maybe we take a moment for our own reflection of this question first up. Is your meditation practice, your turning up tonight as part of the Dharma explorations and meditation practices, does it feel for you in the depths and in the quietness that this is part of a spiritual journey? Or does it feel like it is part of a day-to-day survival, kind of building a kit of survival? And as I said, what is your relationship, or what's your sense of how these two aspects meet? So let's just take a few moments. I'll give us just maybe 3 minutes of quietness for this. You can close your eyes if you think that might be helpful. You can utilize the container of us sitting together to bring some concentration into this inquiry. Okay. So I'm not going to pry into this at this point. Don't feel like you're going to get put on the spot. It's not a test. Although there will be time and space for shared reflections at some point through the evening. So just make a mental note if something stands out for you. The next point of inquiry, really honing in on a more specific sense of motivation. What could be a supportive motivation for our larger sense, if we connect with the sense of the spiritual journey, really clarify, taking the time to see what feels really deep and supportive as a motivation or aspiration for the spiritual practice. Because we all know that it's not always easy, so it's not always pleasant. So it needs to be more than just to feel good, but to really hone in on that might be quite helpful. And then taking it to the specific of our meditation. What is a helpful aspiration or helpful motivation when we sit to turn up for our meditation? And you can really look at tonight what you think might be supportive. So we're circling the same kind of terrain, just taking a slightly different angle in. So again, I'll just give you a few moments to let that land and let that bubble. Okay, thank you. And just take a moment. Sometimes when we're asked these questions, and we have the moment for reflection, sometimes it can be quite interesting what bubbles up, and sometimes it can be a little unexpected. So also just to give space to kind of integrate your own reflections. And so the final question before we move into our practice tonight, just notice how you feel right now. Notice what the sense of receptivity and sensitivity is in the body, heart and mind as you've connected to coming together, to listening to the inquiry, and then indeed taking the quietness for this reflection and this inquiry. Just notice the effect, if any, this has had in the quality and texture, the state of being. What do you notice in your own experience about even asking these questions, the effect that it has? Okay. So I will ask some questions and you can just simply nod or shake your head accordingly so I get a visual response. First of all, can you all hear me? Okay, good. Good start. So working backwards in that last reflection, did you notice that some sensitivity came through the system, through the journey of the inquiry? Did anyone feel agitated by the inquiry? Freya, are you happy to give more words to the agitation or not? And it's fine if you don't want to.
It's really funny. I was actually thinking about this before this meditation, and I had this fantasy of being in Dharma circle and someone coming in a lot of pain and asking whether their pain would be welcome. And this is like a very self-serving fantasy of me being a really kind person. So just ignore that part of it. But in it, I was like thinking about the reason that I first started coming to Dharma circle, and it was to just deal with my own pain. And now it's kind of changed, and I don't know what it is anymore, the reason, but it's not just my own pain, but I don't know what it is, and so it feels really unsettling to not know what I'm doing this for. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Freya. It's nice to hear that. And I think just a quick word of encouragement to respond to what you've said is perhaps it's possible to take encouragement by the fact that something has opened up, Freya. That it isn't just that sense of wanting to kind of soothe our own pain or your own sense of pain, but actually that's something has flourished that is more expansive than that. And even if we don't know what's next, to even acknowledge that in order for there to even have the capacity for that kind of opening, in a sense, is already quite a beautiful and remarkable thing. And it certainly takes a lot of courage and a lot of stability and a lot of wisdom for us to kind of allow the opening beyond just our own initial self-soothing that can be often the beginning as to why we've turned up to some form of practice like this. So does that resonate? Is that okay? And I think that this is why I find it potent and important that we do pause and ask these questions, because just as Freya has identified, things do change. We want them to change in a sense. I mean, life is constantly changing. Inner world is certainly not static, but sometimes in our ways of being, we can kind of lose a real lively contact with what's actually happening, and we're still working on an older version of something. We haven't kind of updated our connection with what's really going on, and that seems like a bit of a pity, really, because the whole process of the journey is of a deepening and expansive in its quality, in its nature. And if it's not, then it's something that we really need to check as to what our approach is to our practice. So as a starting point, I often think for myself and what I observe in others is, if our practice is furthering a sense of self-obsession and contraction and pain, and really seeming to be on an ongoing basis just reinforcing that and not enlivening some sensitivity and some current to the, sometimes we recognize it as it happening as a simultaneous experience. We can have really genuinely uncomfortable contact with our deepest contractions, and it's very uncomfortable, but through the practice we have sort of, if you like, a simultaneous kind of depth of expansion and opening, which kind of holds all of that. But if that's not happening, if we're just getting caught in the state of contraction and the turbulence and becoming kind of more entangled in that sense, then sometimes we need to pause and just check in about the way that we are going about what it is that we're calling our practice, and to kind of do a real check-in and to see if anything needs to be updated, if anything needs to be looked at and supported to loosen up in certain ways and nourishing in other ways. Again, is this making sense? So all of you here, I really get this. I've known most of you for an extended period of time, and there's a real depth and to your practice, and each one of you are on in one sense, a deeply personal journey, and on the other, that is beyond the personal, and you're very much in contact with that to varying degrees at different times. So it's good to know that in this sense, this all becomes more and more vivid and clear as we go along in the journey, what I call the spiritual life and the life in the Dharma. There is less and less places to hide, and that can be, on one hand, deeply, as I said, deeply unsettling, and on the other, for me personally, I find it a great relief. But I also recognize that there can be a stepping stone there that can feel from one side of it like it's a very big step, but in actual fact, it's not so much. Yeah, but sometimes when we're habituated in our hiding, it feels like exposure is too much. But once we recognize there is nothing to hide, like genuinely, and nowhere to hide in a sense, then it really takes the pressure off. So we can kind of enjoy it a little more and not get too heavy in it. So these are just some quiet reflections. We will take this now if everyone is ready to move into some quiet practice. And I'm not going to speak too much through this. I'll just settle us into the space together, and then really to give you an opportunity to let kind of, if it's helpful, to kind of let this percolate and see if something emerges from this depth of heart and sensitivity and interest. The fact that it is Thursday night, 8 o'clock, and we're here online. So there's something here. I would like you to just check into your own hearts and let the seeds of what is there just have a little bit more space and a little more kind of awareness and sensitivity, and just let it grow a little and see what happens. Does that sound like a nice plan? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to be spiritual gardeners together. The seeds are already planted. We're just going to journey into some quietness so we can take care of what's already here. So let the eyes close and let the body land in a comfortable state of stillness. A stillness that is not held with any kind of rigidity. Feeling the weight of the body settling comfortably toward the earth. And in the arms, the fingers and the thumbs all soften. And letting the abdomen relax. Letting the muscles around the ribs relax. Just allowing a sense of lengthening of the spine, a feeling of spaciousness from the base all the way to the crown of the head. Sometimes this means that there is a physical adjustment to the posture, but sometimes it's just an internal opening that brings a little more space for the breath, a little bit more brightness through the eyes. Just allow the breath to find a very natural rhythm. And simply feeling the sensation of the breath coming in and going out. Feeling the way the body responds to the breath. The way the breath responds to the body. Feeling the long breath as a long breath. The short breath as a short breath. Neither are problematic. There's no need to put any pressure into the system at all, just taking the time to feel a sense of diffusing with each outgoing breath, feeling the pressure subside through the body, and perhaps even the heart and mind, breath by breath, feeling a little more at home, a little more comfortable. Leaning into the quietness with a sense of relief. Feeling the body still and comfortable. And nothing more is required, everything is taken care of. Feeling the coming and the going of the breath that requires no effort from you whatsoever. No direction is required. The breath simply coming in, the body being nourished, the breath moving out, the body releasing what is no longer necessary. Each breath just taking what is required and releasing what is no longer necessary. It's quite extraordinary. The body, heart and mind are feeling quite comfortable You're welcome just to settle with the openness of the inquiry, to see what is sprouting in the heart space. To see if we can take the lead of the breath, letting in what is required for nourishment and letting go all that is no longer necessary. Giving space and opening for reflection, deep listening. Nothing demanding. Just letting the thoughts come and go, just like the breath. Letting the nourishment in, relinquishing that is no longer necessary, that's no longer helpful. I invite you now just to gather back and rest with the flow of the breath quite particularly. Just coming back to the feeling of the breath with some clarity, steadiness of heart and mind. without changing anything, keeping in contact with the steadiness of heart and mind and the flow of the breath, letting the eyelids open, just including some contact with the environment around. Letting the stillness permeate the experience. A sense of quietness. A calm. Perhaps you're able to listen to the evening, to not be bothered by any sounds that are perhaps coming from another room or outside. Just letting the sounds be part of the experience. Seeing if a sense of space, quietness and stillness can permeate the experience of even the sounds. Bringing the palms together, and in your own way just letting the head bow down. Taking a moment for your own contemplation and reflection. A little space to integrate any insights. Space for questions or places of confusion. And to take a moment to clarify if anything felt as though became a little clearer. The question of aspiration or motivation, if any part of this became a little more clear, just by contacting the experience with this question quietly in the background. So I'm going to ask you to share at this point, if you would be moved to. It really is a generous thing to do, to offer something of your voice and your experience in. So please just unmute yourself and speak, even if it's just a little of your experience and reflections.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Trish, okay.
Great.
I just want to say about the motivation. Definitely at the start of doing this work, which was, I'm not sure how long ago, some months ago, the motivation was quite different to what I realized, just recently realized, and you put it into words. It is now a different journey and much, much more fulfilling. That's how it feels.
It's lovely to hear, Trish.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
I miss seeing all your faces.
Lovely to see you, Riva. Hello.
Hi. I haven't been practicing, and I really miss it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came up for me when you asked that question of why you're here, come back, and the first thing that sprung, the first kernel, was loneliness.
Yeah.
And it's so nice to see everyone. And there's also an inside, there's a clarity that comes in this space that makes it feel like being alone isn't lonely.
Yeah.
And I really like that and miss it, and it's calming. And I think that's just one part, but that's what came to me.
Yeah. That's lovely. Thank you.
And I miss you all. It was nice to see you.
It's great to see you. And I really, can I just pick up on what you said, just that I will put it into different words, and I apologize if I misrepresent what you've said, but what it stirred in me is really, so as River was saying, that the kind of the motivation to turn up was to feel like, from loneliness, wanting to come into some sense of connection with others, even if it's in this kind of virtual space. But in actual fact, through the practice, the deeper aspect of the practice and the inquiry, what we come to is not just feeling fulfilled, like we've got our fill of seeing the faces, but actually that in coming into that deeper space, the actual kind of the whole sense of loneliness changes. It doesn't hold what it held before. That being alone in some physical sense, the experience is transformed beyond the concept or the sense of separation and the pressure that's involved in the loneliness experience is transformed into a deeper understanding of life and connection. And so it's not just it's not like I was thirsty and I took a drink and it was the drink that quenched my thirst on a physical level. It's that deeper contact to your own depth of wisdom and heart, and that together we support one another, connecting to a deeper sense of things, and we discover that truth. Is that okay, River?
Yeah, that was bang on. Totally.
It's a lovely point to share. Thank you.
So I had a much more comfortable meditation tonight than usual, which is really nice. And your question at the start about, are we doing this just to kind of settle the mind or the nervous system so that we can sort of get through our next day? It's a really great question. It made me remember a time it was 10 days silent, and I just had this moment where I realised this has nothing to do with quietening my mind. This is to do with connecting with consciousness that is nothing to do with my head or my brain. That is that flows through me, everybody else, and everything else. And that consciousness is exactly the same. And tapping into that and knowing so clearly that that's what it's about. And it changed me. And it's funny because I don't cling to it or desire it or anything. But wow, that's all I can say. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, Katie. Nice. That is a very important point of when we are not just moved to our practice as a self-soothing like this, and particularly as Katie mentioned, some sense of trying to just simply calm the mind, that as a hope or an expectation is quite limited and limiting, because what we discover along the way is that there is a sense of, my language, I hope, is not too leading, but this sense of expansiveness that sometimes it doesn't require the mind to be not thinking, that we can still have this contact with this kind of deeper current of life, which is quite freeing, even when the mind is still in a state of that patterned movement and kind of internal sparring that sometimes happens. And so if we just have the motivation for our meditation practice to simply bring our mind into a more settled state, and then that can lead to immediate frustration with the meditation, because we often realize that the mind doesn't kind of comply to that too much. But also it narrows down these kind of important points of really what is available in that kind of broader contact as we deepen our sensitivity to the reality of existence. And I think that not trying to be too fluffy with the language, but really our meditation is kind of like it's our own little test tube, if you like, of inquiry. We've got this extraordinary human consciousness and indeed human body that has every aspect of the universe quite literally, as part of its kind of structure. It's extraordinary. And so we, in that sense, are not required to kind of to have there's a problem with what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say we don't need anything else, in a sense, with the kind of this intelligence and wisdom guiding the inner inquiry. It's all there, and this can be really helpful to know that it's not a matter of pushing past any of our experiences, but opening up to a space which allows the intelligence to flow through the whole experience of being, which includes our troubles, and our difficulties and our challenges. That there is that capacity to let the wisdom unravel and permeate through even our difficult times.
I'm glad that you said what you just said about the difficulties and the troubles, and also raising the inquiry around what it means to be following a spiritual path. And I think I definitely have seen that evolve now over quite a few years, and would definitely fall into that category of someone who was looking to escape from something at a time. And I've moved through challenges of meditation and some joys of meditation and the broader spiritual practice. I'm finding at the moment that with that, you talked before about that opening up, that I'm finding that opening up, it's really happened a lot for me over the last, certainly over the last few months during the COVID experience, and also the Black Lives Matter and other things that are going on. In that discomfort with that opening up for me at the moment, when I try and sit in that real deep calm, and we talk about the texture of experiences and being able to really what is the reality and touching consciousness, all these things that people have been saying. But I'm realizing now that there's this real challenge for me, and that is, especially if I think about things like sort of racism and all of these other sort of broader issues, is I'm having to ask myself some really searching questions about what reality is, like stripping away those layers of the human experience to try and, my spiritual path feels more about really trying to feel what that human experience is without all of the systems and everything that are in place that have been developed over years that have impacted me subconsciously around things that have programmed me. And through this practice, I have to make sure that I'm not striving too much for this, because I know that there's a danger that I'll keep digging and searching without just sometimes just kind of resting with it and just seeing how it unfolds. But I'm definitely finding that I know that there's some really challenging times for me coming up, because I'm asking myself those really searching questions around what do I really, is this who I really am, or is this who I'm programmed to be? And trying to sort of let some of that sort of drop away from me. And some of it's beautiful and joyful and wonderful, but some of it's horrible and makes me feel like I have to do some soul searching and make sure I don't delve into the past too much, and accept the mistakes I've made with certain things and be okay with that. But I just wanted to share for a second that that's how that journey can really swing quite wildly at times, but also keeps it very interesting at the same time.
That's
Thank
great.
you for letting me share. Thank you.
No, thanks, Daz. That's precious to hear. And yeah, again, I just want to give encouragement. I try and make sure that in these conversations I'm as kind of balanced with this as possible, but I certainly don't want to give the impression that this is always an easy and joyful ride, and that it's about just kind of smoothing it all out and off we go. Sometimes for each of us, the journey can get a little rough and raw at times, and at other times it can be quite static and quite blissful, and quite at other times really just quite even and peaceful and every other kind of manifestation of experience in amongst there is just as relevant and valid. And that the wholeness of the human experience is part of the path. And then the way in which we, as you said, does the way that we kind of hold the inquiry and making sure, as you pointed out, from your experience, the tendency to kind of go into that digging mode where that becomes like a dog with a bone, and you recognize that is part of a kind of the language I'm going to use is like an unwholesome or an unhelpful kind of pattern, and indeed conditioning that has that kicks in sometimes as a way of to continue a striving that doesn't let you just, if you like, sit in it, to let it kind of unfold in a more natural way. So there is always this dance. The wisdom in this is like, and that's why I talk about developing sensitivity so much, because it's the sensitivity with the wisdom that enables us to understand kind of our own conditioning, and those parts of the patterns that are helpful at times, and those parts of our conditioning that are sometimes kick into unhelpful patterns of behavior and thought and so forth, and that each of us have to journey this very honestly in our life. And if we're not willing to see that, then we can kind of be taken off track quite quickly and quite ferociously, actually. So along the way, we have to develop the Dharma gives very good guidelines for us to understand and to kind of check into. It's not as though we're just on an open page and have no direction. The Dharma and our practice gives us very clear instructions as a way of kind of coming to a healthy sort of pivoting point. So then we can again open up if we need to, so we don't get too entangled in that. So these are really good points. And in a sense, the question of kind of who am I beyond the conditioning is, there's different ways that we can structure this question, but so important to see that for most of us, most of the time, what we identify as ourselves and others is indeed just a collection of habituated patterns and conditionings from all kinds of places. And that was sort of skillfully developed consciously and unconsciously. It's really interesting to see that and to recognize that when we ask the question, particularly from a Dharma perspective, when we are looking for the self, we start sometimes with a particular view of what that means, what that question is asking us. And if we take it really deeply, we come to recognize that the teachings of non-self, for instance, is not trying to kind of set us into a state of despair. It's not about kind of pulling everything apart and feeling like there's no point, and it's not this kind of annihilation sense, but actually really to look at all the things and all the places and all the attributes that we take and hold as me and mine and I, really looking deeply and closely at those things and looking for if there is anything that is consistent, if there is anything permanent, self-evident, or indeed are all of these things, even that I consider to be me, are they all indeed in some way constantly shifting and changing? And therefore there is some freedom when we see this, Daz. So it's not even like when we see the conditioned nature of things, it's not, so it's a disheartening story. That in one sense we can say that some of our training that we do with our meditation practice in some way is conditioning the mind in a particular kind of a way, to try and condition or create the internal environments to let kind of deeper wisdom and love and compassion and insight really flourish. And this is, in one way we can say very much that this is a type of conditioning. We set earlier, I asked you about intentions and aspirations in a sense, to really let that be informative in our day and in our practice. In one way, we're inviting more clarity of this so it can condition, it can support real changes in attitude and behavior through our day. So we want to look and say, well, the nature of things that arise is conditioned, that all things that arise are conditioned. So let's use it to our advantage rather than feel like it's a sad story or that it's a desperate story, that we see actually the fact that life is conditioned in this sense actually is a way of really recognizing the freedom and the responsibility that we have to be constantly, or as much as possible, influencing our inner and outer environments in ways that will support and condition the best possible outcomes for ourselves and all sentient beings in the earth and the universe and consciousness. So the looking into the conditioned nature of things does very important, because we see the things, the prejudice and the discriminations that kind of are built in, that when we really can start to see them playing out externally and internally, they can leave quite a bad taste in our mouth. But there's also great freedom in understanding the nature of the conditioned state of being. The fact that it is conditioned means it is not permanent, which means it is changeable, which means it is open to influence. And therefore it is confirming freedom. Yes. So I want to make sure that we have very clear, and I'm hoping some inspiration to support, exactly as Daz pointed out, this question of who am I, or what am I, in a way that can really open up and continue to kind of nourish the best version of ourselves. I'm playing with the language, and that the best way in which we move as individuals and as a community in the world. These are important questions. Thank you. Does everybody understand the language of conditioning? Is that a language that has left anyone feeling a little lost? It's completely reasonable if it doesn't land for you. Bal.
You said something like noticing that all things are conditioned is the confirmation of freedom, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But
you were listening.
That in my mind set up this idea that freedom is somehow something that has to be conditioned. I don't know. That's like as if there has to be the right conditions for it. So if there isn't freedom now, you practice the Dharma, you change your conditions, and I don't know. That's a strange.
Okay, so that certainly wasn't the intention. I definitely don't want to give you the impression that freedom is conditioned. Freedom is not conditioned. It's not reliant on conditions. But this is again. I feel like Bal, there's a move that's happened here. There's a move here. There's a jump in the mind. Dare I say it? There's some conditioning for that jump in the mind, and I think it might be worthwhile you just taking some time to really look into it, because in a sense you've had to do some work there to get to that point. just to recap the point, if we understand that all things that are arising are impermanent, that the arising of things happens within causes and conditions. So all that we can talk about it is in the relative sense of all things that come and go are all conditioned. And the fact that there is this impermanence, the fact that we recognize the kind of conditioned nature of things, of phenomena, of experience, of the mind, gives us a doorway to understand and really deeply appreciate freedom. So freedom is not conditioned, but when we recognize the impermanence and the conditioned nature of all things, it can, if we look deeply into it, it can be a doorway into recognizing the if you like, the nature of freedom. Yeah. Whereas what you've done is you've kind of jumped onto it very quickly, and the mind's kind of wanted to kind of set it in a particular place. Yeah. Does that give you a starting point for continuing your inquiry?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
I feel like I'm a bit lost now, but honestly, I don't even know in what way.
Yeah.
So it might be something that I just meditate on later and then come back to. But I think I just wanted to put out there that I'm felt a little bit lost by that, so that I don't just remain
quiet,
forever silent about it. You know?
No, that's great, Stacey. That's lovely. So this is actually a very important teaching. Like this last bit about the conditioned nature of things. This is not something that. So some of you have inquired into this in your own experience and in different ways, and so there's already that kind of opening for this inquiry. But if this is the first time you've thought about it, please don't give yourself a hard time. This is a profound teaching, and it's not something that you can just necessarily, you might be able to just pick it up and have a sip and go, yeah, cool, no problem. So Stacey, no problem at all. And I do recommend, if you're inspired to kind of sit with it a little bit and to really look at the nature of things. And what we mean by conditioned in this sense is that things influence other things. Everything's reliant on all things. Yeah. So nothing kind of just pops up as an individually self-evident, self-existing, self-determined thing. Does that make sense? That this interdependence of things is very, very important to see.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, like, that I understand. I feel like I might have just got lost in some words somewhere. Okay. But it's. I wish I could understand at what point or how.
Yeah.
I think it's something to do with the freedom. I don't even know where to go with this. I'm going to have to think about it and come back to you.
No problem. Yeah. Maybe we all do that.
Yeah.
So it's very important. Really important that we're not looking outward. We don't create the idea or a concept of freedom, which is kind of abstract, that we really look into the experience as it is, like what the experience is of living, what life experience is, and to come to recognize, to touch, to taste directly the freedom within the experience as it is. Yeah. So is anybody feeling so lost that they don't want to leave this conversation right now because they'll just be spinning and not getting any sleep? Or do you feel like that perhaps this is a nice place for us to start our winding down? All right. Well, we've gone full circle. Just to wrap it up, we started with looking at kind of our intention and our motivation and aspiration for sitting and meditation and practice. And if indeed it is spiritual practice and what that means. And in a sense, the answers not being set, as both Freya and Patricia both gave very honest responses of how much that has changed. And so we recognize that these two are also impermanent things changing. Yeah. And but actually that our aspiration or intention or motivation, why it's important is because it does condition, if you like, it does set up certain conditions that can be quite supportive to deepen and clarify the kind of level of inquiry, the way in which we respond to the inner world, and indeed the way in which we move in the outer world, can be very much helpfully supported by clear intention. So that intention, that motivation becomes a condition, if you like, to link these things together. Do you all understand that? And in a sense, that's why it's important, because if we're unclear, then we're missing an opportunity for some deep support and nourishment in our practice. And the unclear, just if I can just be clear about the unclear, Freya, to your point, that doesn't mean what you said before about that it's still an open question. That's not a problem. That's not what I'm saying. Is it's when we are interested in it, even if we can't answer it, but there's some interest, we're in that open space. So it's not known, but there is still some connection to this kind of deeper inquiry. That's perfect, no problem at all. So what do you think, my friends? Does that leave you with some questions and some support and nourishment for the week of practice, of life, of relationships, of love and sweetness and roller coaster rides? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Sam.
Lovely to see you. See you soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.